Goeienaand, baie welkom by Fokus. Ek is Lenet Francis Peuren. President Cyril Ramaphosa lewer môre aan sy staatsrede. Baie mense hoop dat hulle gaan hoor hoe die land se magtomprobleme opgelos gaan word. Beurtkrag is vir baie 'n groot bron van kommer en daarmee saam kom watertekorte. Dan is daar ook nog kommer oor werkloosheid, honger en die toestand van ons land se paaie. Maar een Suid-Afrikaner glo alles is nie verlore nie. Dr. Imtiaz van die organisasie Gift of the Givers glo aan aktiewe burgerskap en dat Suid-Afrikaners kan saam staan en help om die land se probleme op te los. Ons is nou via Zoom in verbinding met Dr. Suliman. And thank you so much for joining us this evening, Dr. Suliman. I know you're very busy. What's the latest report you've received from your team in Turkey about the extent of the damage there?
Good evening, Lynette. The extent of the damage is totally horrendous. The teams have arrived in Istanbul this morning. They were flown to Adana, and the earthquake zone is 2 hours away from Adana. That's about the only functional airport. 10 cities have been severely damaged. Apparently, from the Turkish authorities themselves, two cities don't exist anymore. That's the extent of the damage. The death toll is going to expect to rise in the thousands and thousands injured, thousands displaced. Everybody at the airport received them with such open arms. They were so grateful and team and all teams coming because they need all the help they can get. It said it's a total disaster and they're afraid the amount of lives they're going to lose and the amount of families they're going to lose. And of course, infrastructure is all destroyed. It's unlike other earthquakes. When we do such a rescue, we can move personnel of people towards hospitals to treat them. There's no hospitals here. Virtually all the hospitals are damaged or destroyed, so you can't actually work as a medical team in that big zone, and that's a big challenge they have right now. You can't put a field hospital because the field hospital is not warm. The temperatures are -5 degrees. So the snow, the rain, and the cold are deterring factors that makes life far more complicated.
How do you determine what the immediate need is and how to manage that? You just mentioned the field hospital and the challenges that exist. Give us insight into how you go about supporting and helping and in a sense, stabilizing the situation.
It's not something we've done for the first time. No, we go into an earthquake and we know the process. Of course, the most difficult process is right at the beginning. You have red tape, you have bureaucracy, you have visa issues, you have flights, you have difficulty where to land, with the road transport. All those things were very easy. The Turkish authorities were very, very open and supportive. In fact, they called us. So that made life much easier. Secondly, to get to an area, once you land, how to get there can be complicated. And that's the reason, it's 2 hours away from the nearest airport. So it's going to be about a road drive. Then getting to the buildings, this time it's more scary and more risk because up till yesterday, there are 320 aftershocks. But these are not small aftershocks. They are 6+ on the Richter scale. We've already had 2 earthquakes, one for 7.8 and one 7.5. And we don't know what in the next 4 or 5 days, and if another massive one comes in the area where teams are working. So that's a huge risk, and it's something that the teams are prepared for. Always with search and rescue, we always support with medical teams. And I've told my teams to find a place not in the earthquake zone, it's too high risk, somewhere closer where we can get easy access to patients and to medical supplies. And for now, it looks like Adana is the best place to do that. Our first request to the Turkish government is to give us an existing hospital, and I can put in the entire team to run the whole hospital. Or alternatively, if that's, and we can bring in another 50 to 70 or even 100 medical personnel if we have to.
Their government reached out to Gift of the Givers and asked for support. Has our government, with all our challenges, ever picked up the phone and said, Dr. Suliman, please come and advise us how to help us with the challenges that we sit with in South Africa?
Well, they haven't said it in that way, but whenever there's a crisis, somebody from government calls. For example, if you take teweeg, what the day zero, in May, the municipality called us. When the fires came in November last year, again, the municipality and the fire chiefs called us. When there's floods in many parts of the country or fires, somebody from government calls us. So they've always asked us, to assist And in fact, one of the ministers actually asked me to come and address the entire team and to say, how do you deal with disasters? And they were very open to that engagement. They had teams from all over the country on Zoom, and they had many people in the room, and they were keen to learn how to do things. And to be honest, after that, in many of the areas, their members had done very, very well, on the sites of disasters. Not all parts of the country, but in many parts of the country, they did very well. We've always had a good relationship, but nobody's come in and told us, come guide or run a government department and show us how to do things. But it has always been cordial, and they've always accepted, what we've done.
What would you consider to be the biggest challenges that South Africa is currently facing?
Number one is the Eskom, obviously, that's having a knock-on effect on many issues, besides lights going off. I mean, people have lived in Africa without lights, but the problem here is without lights, the water systems are being affected. In the last 3 weeks, we are now getting diverted from what we normally do to send in more water tankers, send in bottled water, old age homes, orphanages, schools, funeral homes, funeral parlors, and agricultural areas, all crying for water, and people crying for drinking water. We have to send in more water tankers to assist in the best way we can, and JoJo tanks so they can store the water. So Eskom is affecting water distribution, which is life-saving in many parts of the country. Secondly, quite often when the lights are off, it's causing an impact on the economy because, the businesses close, and then the staff don't get full wages. So the wages are cut, which puts social pressure on them because the company is not working. So they can't pay that kind of salary, and they send the people home. Thirdly, at night, it's high risk in terms of security because alarm systems don't work, the lights don't work. There's high chances of hijacking, armed robbery, breakages, breaking into premises and causing theft. All this a risk because of Eskom. And then, of course, many hospitals that are not off the grid suddenly cannot deal with the ICU, with the theaters, and the aircons. And so often, surgical cases are cancelled. We already had a huge cancellation of surgery since the time of COVID. Now our backlog is running from 3 to 5 years, and those poor people are suffering. So number one, the country has to have a decisive, not the country, the government has to have a decisive plan how to fix Eskom from their side. From our side as civilians, those who can afford it, get off the grid. Companies, businesses, people, individuals, the more of us that get off the grid, the less pressure on Eskom, the less the degree of load shedding, the less stages and better chance for the economy to grow till they fix the problem permanently. And of course, if we can have more funding for diesel somehow in the budget, we can reduce the stages of load shedding once we're busy with alternative sources of energy in terms of solar and wind. So the first one is Eskom. Number two, water areas, when many areas are still having water issues, and the drilling of boreholes is critical. We've drilled more than 500 boreholes in the last 2 or 3 years. And in fact, in teweeg, we use those boreholes to fill the water tankers to go put out the fire. And without those boreholes, it would have been total chaos in the area. So boreholes are required, and at some point, we should put it in every hospital. Right now, we've put 3 in Helen Joseph and 2 in Rahima Musa, and that's sad, because Johannesburg is the richest city on the continent, but they can't solve the problem of water in hospitals. It only requires decisive action and to put boreholes in hospitals that need it, but we need that nationwide where there's water crisis, and we need it in the schools. Thirdly, a major issue in hospitals. Hospitals have to be fixed up in terms of infrastructure upgrade, and there's lots of other issues with hospitals. But to me, the most important part about hospitals is the fact that registrar posts have been cut. Once you cut registrar posts and you freeze them, which is the case right now, it means you don't train specialists,
yes,
which means it's an impact on the patients. And if you don't have specialists at the same time, if you don't have registrars, you don't train the students below you. So those doctors are not going to get learning. The government is saying they don't have the money.
Dr. Suleiman, yes. Sorry for interrupting you. We'll continue our conversation after the break. Moenie weggaan nie. Ons is nou terug, dan praat ons verder oor Suid-Afrika se toestand en die uitdagings wat ons in die gesig staar. Nou terug. Welkom terug. Suid-Afrika het al telke male groot uitdagings te bowe gekom ten spyte van die doemprofete wat die ergste voorspel het. Dr. Imtiaz van Gift of the Givers glo Suid-Afrikaners moet help om die land se uitdagings te oorkom. Ons praat via Zoom met hom. Just before the break you were giving us some background to what our challenges in South Africa is. And we've heard the president, and I'm paraphrasing and summarizing what he said, saying that the private sector should stop complaining and moaning and literally get involved in problem solving. Is that justified criticism given where we're at and how far we've come?
I don't think it's correct to say they should stop crying. Private sector have done a huge contribution to the country. You know, the government should look at fixing its own faults first. You know, and it needs to strengthen the SIU, which is doing a good job. It needs to strengthen the Hawks. It needs to strengthen those aspects of crime prevention and security that can hold Parliament accountable and hold the state accountable. Because if they were doing their job properly, we won't have the problems we've had that has happened in the last 10 years. So on the one side, government needs to clean up its own act, put in people of quality, capable people, you know, people who have the skill to fix things in the country, because it's not their country. It's the country that belongs to the people of South Africa, and they owe it to those who voted them in to make sure they serve the people in the most efficient way. Unfortunately, many of them have forgotten why they've gone to Parliament. They've gone to serve themselves and not the people. And that's not what you go to Parliament for. People put you with faith and hope and trust. You need to fix the system. The private sector has a role to play. Because to be fair to government, the taxes of 7.4 million people cannot look after 65 million people. It doesn't matter who the government is and which country they come from. Be it Australians, Americans, Canadians, Germans who run this country, they're all going to run into problems because of the tax base being so low. So given that problem, right now, whilst we have a crisis in terms of budgets and finances, and because we've lost so much of money through theft, of wastage, things not functional, overpaying for things, we need to fix that. That's not going to happen overnight. But in the process, private sector has to come in very effectively to help fix the things that I spoke about earlier. Health, education, water, you know, and going off the grid in terms of electricity. And you need teachers that for kids with learning disorders, for helping fight crime. All those things are required. And when you do that, give government 3 to 4 years and say, put your act together, and we as private sector are helping, you know, to fix, not for government, but in the interest of the country and its people.
What are your thoughts about the suggestion of a tax revolt as a form of punishment to government because they've wasted the taxes of South Africans?
I don't agree with that kind of initiative, because whilst there are things that are not going right, the taxes are used in a lot of other ways too. And we need to understand that everybody in government is not corrupt. Every department is not bad. Every person is not a bad person. So we need to hold the hands of the right people. But again, what I stressed earlier, that we need to strengthen the SIU, the Hawks, the NPA, and such structures to make sure that the money is used correctly. You can't use the money any other way. It's going to be very difficult for private entities to try to use the tax money, and we're just going to go more backwards. So they have to find a system on how to use the money correctly, and the only way they can do that is to clean up their own mess.
Let's talk about your optimism, and you call yourself a disaster tourist, and you say South Africans are resilient. Explain that to me.
We need to understand that with all the difficulty that we have, let me explain the resilient part first. People have been without electricity for years in many parts of the country. People have been without water in many parts of the country. They drink water but sheep, pigs, horses, cows, and dogs, and still they wait patiently. We've had people suffering from hunger and children dying from hunger, especially in the Eastern Cape, in the Transkei region. They still stood patiently and hoped and waited that something positive would happen for them. And they've been waiting for 28 years and hundreds of years before that. We had COVID-19. People lost their lives, jobs were lost, economy was destroyed, but people came back bouncing. Just look at December this year. After the floods of 2019, COVID of 2020, civil unrest of 2021, floods of 2022, load shedding up to stage 6. The stadiums are full, the hotels are full, the malls are full. People are coming back to life. They're going out. They said they've lost their jobs, they have difficulty, but they're holding on and they're putting a face and they're coming forward. Look at corporate companies. They've had so many, I've been to so many events where I had to be a guest speaker. And everybody as corporate is saying, let's relook at our systems. How do we fix our companies, become more profitable, and at the same time, how do we support CSI and support the country and the people of the country, which is great resilience. A point that you haven't asked me, it's not related to the question, but it's important to mention. What all the difficulties we have, we need to understand that it's still a great country. And as you mentioned, I'm a disaster tourist. We've responded to 45 countries in crisis. We are very fortunate that we don't have bombs falling over us, missiles, and we're not tearing each other apart. I've been to countries where people in the same locality, same neighborhood, same color, same race, same religion, tear each other apart. And that you can't fix for 300 or 400 years. To us, the crowning moment was 27 April 1994. The whole country said, buy food, stock up, keep your passport ready, keep your jewelry and money. We're going to run. We have to escape from the country. There'll be violence. There'll be all kinds of difficulty. And the South African population spoke without speaking. The action said, we will stand in those long queues. We will vote. We were not violent. We were not destructive. People who were oppressed for years, people whose family members were detention without trial, whose family members disappeared, who were killed, came up very patient. When you can survive that kind of difficulty and you have that kind of attitude from that kind of population, all other problems we have now are not insurmountable. The greatest problem we overcame was not violence.
Before we go to our break, I do want to ask you, given the poverty, the challenges that you've just mentioned, do you believe this government understands or knows the extent of the suffering of its people?
No, it doesn't. And I keep telling them, stop sitting in your offices. Go out and see the crisis of the people. Let me give you one example. In Eastern Cape, I mentioned children are dying from starvation. And then we tried to do research and we spoke to the health department and the dietitians. And we were trying to figure out, why were these kids dying? Why did they not seek hospital help early? We then understood that the people, the adults, are quite used to going hungry, are quite used to go hungry for days. And they think it's quite normal for the child to go hungry also. But a child does not survive, an adult survives. So by the time they bring the child to the clinic or the health facility, it's too late and the child dies. Now, if politicians and councillors who are elected to serve the country get out of the air-conditioned offices, the expensive cars, worry about elective conferences, worry who's going to take the next vote, and know what it's selected for, and go to the areas, they will be able to pick up the difficulty that people have. And this is a message to the people.
I'm going to interrupt you there. After the break, I'll ask you to just complete your thought. Bly ingeskakel, daar's nog baie vrae. Ons is nou net terug. Maar wat moet president Cyril Ramaphosa en sy regering doen om onder meer die elektrisiteitskrisis op te los? Ons praat nou verder met Dr. Imtiaz van Gift of the Givers. We've got about 2 minutes to wrap this up. So in conclusion, you already said that government requires decisive plans and decisive action. But you also said earlier this evening that this country is still our country. What's our responsibility in this?
All South Africans need to do their bit to help each other, whether it be to help your neighbor, whether it help somebody in your company, whatever little we can do, we need to do it together. And we cannot build this country without holding each other's hands, be it ordinary people, professionals, corporate companies, and government. And there are 4 important principles we need to inculcate across all 65 million people. That is spirituality, morality, values, and above all, ethics. If we start bringing ethics in government, in the country, in private sector, in the public, even civil servants who do their work in hospitals, teachers, police people, everybody. If we have those values, we can fix our system. We won't need anybody to police us. We'll police ourselves. And the moment we reach that stage, we will see prosperity in the country where everybody helps everybody. And one final point, all of us should regard our children in our community as our children. Collectively, we need to guide the children, put them on the right path so they don't get caught up in all the crisis and the gangsterism and drugs, which destroys the youth of the nation and the country. We need to fix that as a community.
Thank you so much for joining us this evening and for your insights and direction that you've shared with us and our viewers. We appreciate your time and good luck and all strength for the work in Turkey. Dit is ongelukkig al vir vanaand. Onthou, indien jy die uitsending wel misloop weens beurtkrag, Fokus is steeds op YouTube beskikbaar. Ons groet jou dan tot volgende Woensdag aand om 7. Tot dan, doen jou deel en ek doen my deel. Totsiens.